breaking news today.
Please subscribe and then check notification box to get all breaking news alerts.
North Dakota Somali Muslim calls cops on his neighbor after he sees what's in his car, demands arrest. Your typical friendly neighborhood Muslim, Yussuf Mohamed, 1A, U.S. citizen from Somalia, who has been in the United States since 1998 but hardly speaks a word of English, left his South Fargo apartment about 6 p.m. on Monday evening, September 18 to go out to dinner. But when he opened the car door of his 2003 Toyota Corolla, he was immediately struck by an overpowering stench. He turned on his cell phone flashlight, looked around the car and discovered that what he believes is animal feces had been smeared all over the seats, on the dashboard and throughout the car.
As Welcoming Week starts in our metro to celebrate diversity, a heinous act that human rights activists are calling a hate crime.
WDAY6 reporter Cassie Rolfing joins us live tonight with what happened and what activists want to see done. Cassie.
Dana and Kirsten, in the parking lot of a South Fargo apartment building, a Somali man says his car was broken into and animal feces was spread all over it. Human rights activists say this is yet another example of the need for hate crime legislation here in North Dakota.
This is what is happening in Fargo, North Dakota.
A 12-minute-long Facebook video.
Look at this car.
Showing Fargo man Yussuf Mohamed's car covered in feces.
It's offensive in every culture, let me put it that way.
He says he went out to his car yesterday evening and found it like this, broken into and vandalized.
I don't know who did it.
Yussuf came to Fargo in 1998 and has lived in this apartment since 2012.
My neighbors was good.
He says while most of the time he's felt welcomed in the metro, he believes this situation may be connected to a run-in with a neighbor last week.
He did whatever he can say. My religion, my color, even he tell me you not belong to here.
Human rights groups like North Dakota United Against Hate are pushing for hate crime legislation in North Dakota.
People attacking the immigrants and others because of their race, because of their religion.
They say this is the fourth situation directed at new Americans since March.
These things happen daily, every day.
Prosecutors say hate crime laws would be difficult to prove in court, and judges already take the nature of the crime into account. But activists say that's not enough. They say people aren't coming forward because they don't feel like anything will be done.
No one should have the experience of harassment and intimidation in their own home and where they live.
Because they believe everyone deserves to feel safe in the community they call home.
We are human. We are brothers and sisters. We come from same sand.
According to FBI statistics, 31% of hate crimes happen at or near someone's home. Fargo police say they have filed a report on the incident and are investigating, but have not ruled it a hate crime or racially motivated. Reporting live, Cassie Rolfing, WDAY 6 News.
Mohamed then proceeded to call the Fargo Police Department in order to file a report of unlawful entry and criminal mischief to a motor vehicle. He told police that he suspected a neighbor in his apartment building might be responsible because the man insulted him last week because of his race and religion. Mohamed, of course, is a devout Muslim. Police then proceeded to interview the man who was accused by the Religion of Peace disciple but stated they would not be releasing any information on the investigation just yet. But things got even better when on Tuesday, the Minnesota chapter of the terrorist organization known as CARE, or Council on American Islamic Relations, called on local, state and federal authorities to investigate the incident as a hate crime. CBN News reports. Ex-Muslim speaks out about the Quran dilemma. It's been 10 years since Muslim terrorists carried out the 9/11 attacks. Yet polls show that most Americans still have very little understanding of Islam. CBN News recently spoke with one former Muslim who is looking to change that by revealing the politically incorrect truth about the Quran. Al-Fadi, a Saudi native, said it's no coincidence that a majority of the 9/11 hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. When I lived in Saudi Arabia, not only did I look at non-Muslims as second class, you would look at non-devout Muslims as second-class citizens, Fadi told CBN News. If Islam has to prosper, be the superior religion, then certain steps must be taken by its followers, including spreading Islam at any cost, including the sword and killing any opposition, he said. Real life under Islam. These days Al-Fadi, which is a pseudonym, lives in the West. He also left Islam for Christianity, a move that would bring a death sentence in his native country. The Quran will emphatically say in chapter 4, verse 157 that the crucifixion never took place, that someone else was made to look like Jesus and was put in his place, Fidi explained. So you learn all of these things and then of course you learn that the Quran tells you to hate the Christians and the Jews, he said. Fidi wants to bring these bitter truths about Islam's holiest book to a Western audience. Like other former Muslims, he's written a book called The Quran Dilemma. The book analyzes the teachings of the Quran from the perspective of someone who actually lived under them. According to Fidi, life under Islam is much different than the whitewashed version often presented by the Western media and Muslim pressure groups. That includes the Quran's call to jihad, or holy war, against non-believers. It is basically a prescriptive demand found in the Quran when it comes to jihad, killing the infidels, spreading Islam until there is no other religion on earth except the religion of Allah, Fidi explained. The West does not know many, if not all, of these things because they're basically oblivious to what the Quran teaches as a whole. They're only fed portions of the Quran, he said. Violent turns. Those peaceful portions, Fidi says, came during the early stages in the career of Islam's prophet, Muhammad. During these years, Muhammad lived in the Saudi city of Mecca with only a handful of followers. His message changed dramatically once he moved to Medina and gained converts and political power. Many of the Quranic verses from that later Medina period include calls to violence and intolerance. Like chapter 8, verse 12, I will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieve. Therefore strike off their heads and strike off every fingertip of them. Then there is the infamous verse of the sword in chapter 9, verse 5, slay the idolaters wherever you find them and take them captives and besiege them and lie in wait for them in every ambush. Meanwhile, chapter 5, verse 51 warns Muslims not to befriend Jews and Christians. Loving your enemies. Fidi said these later verses represent Muhammad's final say on the matter. Any older, more peaceful verses were cancelled out or abrogated by the later revelations. You cannot stand against the religion, you cannot critique the Prophet or the teaching of the Quran, and you cannot leave the religion because you are not free to do so, Fidi said. There is no equality between genders, there is no equality between people of other faiths. Fidi experienced this belief system firsthand growing up in Saudi Arabia, Muhammad's birthplace. He was a radical Wahhabi Muslim who knew members of the bin Laden family. As a young man, Fidi wanted to follow in Osama bin Laden's footsteps and take on Soviets in Afghanistan. I was willing to go fight and die. And then that opportunity didn't take place, Fidi recalled. That's when he decided to attend college in the West, in the very backyard of his sworn enemies. Fidi planned to promote Islam to anyone who would listen. But a funny thing happened along the way. For the first time in his life, Fidi actually met and spent time with Christians. Basically, the more I met people who follow Christ, the more I realized that they are distinct and unique in their character. They're kind, they're patient, they're loving, they have moral values, they don't look at others with hatred, he recalled. At some point I heard the teaching of Christ to love your enemies. Technically speaking, I am their enemy, and they didn't hate me, they actually loved me, he said. Leaving Islam. Before long, Fidi was ready to do what had once been unthinkable, to accept Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. But the decision was not an easy one. For you to leave Islam, you are leaving your identity, your culture, your community, your family, everything that you grew up to believe to be true, he said. There is no separation between state and mosque, state and religion. Fidi's family in Saudi Arabia eventually came to grips with his leaving Islam. One of his brothers, however, still threatens his life on a regular basis. But he said the threats won't stop him from telling the truth about his former religion. Infiltrating the infidels? Muslims know very well that the best way to conquer is not by the sword anymore, Fidi said. It's by infiltrating the societies, the political systems, and by basically taking their time to grow, to become a majority that at some point, They will have a voice that they can topple things basically to their advantage, he said. With the Quran dilemma, Fidi hopes to ensure that never happens. Isn't it great how when Muslims are in the minority they just excel at playing the darn victim card, but when they are in the majority people tend to get beheaded, gays end up flying off of rooftops, and women lose all freedoms whatsoever. The saddest part about all of this is just 20 years ago Fargo, North Dakota was a calm and peaceful city until our politicians thought it was a great idea to start importing terrorists into our beloved nation. Every politician who was involved in the Somali Muslim refugee scam should be arrested and tried for treason against our nation. Thank you for watching this video. What do you think about this? Share this on Facebook and Twitter along with your comments.